And indeed, it does, right? Honestly, I've got no idea what's happening at the moment. It's a massive group that has just gone away at the head of the race. There's a huge group at the front. There's 19 riders kind of dangling in between the peloton and the chase group, and there's a chase group of Quentin Paché, Clément Rousseau, Gianni Vermeers, and Roel van Sint-Maartensdijk, who has pretty much just been dropped back down to that third group on the road. So yeah, it's a pretty difficult one to get organised at the moment. There we go. But yeah, I'm struggling to figure out where the structure of this stage is going. It is all over the road and very hard to keep a hold of. I look away from the stream, or I spent about half an hour making some lunch, and turned my racing stream off, and I come back to utter craziness ensuing, none of which that I understand, apart from the fact that we've got a leading group of 3 that have recently been joined by Mathieu Bourgadeau and Fred Wright. And that group of 3 have been up front pretty much all stage long, because they were certainly up front when I began watching this race, which was super early. In fact, I was watching from breakaway formation, so yeah. But the trio who were initially at the front were Mauro Schmid of Jayco AlUla, Jonas Abrahamsen of Uno X, and finally Davide Ballerini of Astana. So in this massive group that's chasing at the moment, you've got a couple of riders that are pretty huge sprinters. The likes of Arno de Lee, Kees Bol, Dylan Groenewegen have all slipped into this move. Wout Van Aert's there for Visma Lease-A-Bike, as is Aurélien Paré-Pantra. Xandro Murisa is also there. Good puncher on his day, with Frank van den Broek, a rider who we know is after stage victories. Certainly before he has to help Oscar Onley in the high mountain stages for GC. But the massive breakaway is given at the moment about 30 seconds on the peloton. I'd like to know who's leading the peloton to try and chase this at the moment. Is it EF, as the camera flips back from what they're calling Group Murisa, but I'm going to call Group Van Aert? More riders trying to ping off the front. And is that Alpecin Deceuninck looking to control this? Perhaps Van Der Poel's after stage win, as we get a radio from XTS Astana. Guys, there's no rules anymore in cycling. There's no rules, okay? Don't really know what they're trying to say by saying that. I think Mark Renshaw in the Astana car is just as concerned as me about what he's seeing, because this race has had no structure whatsoever. And I think this is part of the way racing is going to be now, as Movistar attack off the front, followed by a rider from Ineos Grenadiers, with representatives from Cofidis on his wheel. And if they can bridge across to this large Van Aert group, then they really have a chance at getting all the way across to the lead. Quinn Simmons is also there in the American National Champions jersey. trying to figure out who that Cofidis rider is. After a couple of days off, I'm very much out of the loop with a lot of things. It looks like Aino Rubio for Movistar's giving it a try. But more and more riders are pinging off the front, thinking that the peloton are going to let this go to a breakaway. But so many interested parties mean that it's going to be so difficult to control. Astana saying there are no rules in cycling had me dead. I mean, I think every team feels like that, but Astana had the balls to say it, I guess. So, now you've got another group that's just pinged itself off the front of the peloton. That includes the likes of American national champion Quinn Simmons, a known prodigy in the breakaway. I feel a bit sad for Davide Ballerini because he's looked like he's about to step off the bike for a good 70 kilometres now. Pretty much as soon as he went in the breakaway. He looks totally gone. But your three-rider, Pache, Russo and Vermeer's group are slowly eating into the gap at the front. Of course, three of the riders at the front have been out there since basically kilometre zero. So they'll be fresher. However, both Fred Wright and Mathieu Bergado will be semi-fresh and injecting some pace into this leading group, which is 1 minute 43 behind what they're calling the peloton, where more and more riders are pinging off the front. If you're Ben Healy, this is such a difficult stage to control. So, the time gaps that I'm seeing at the moment, in case you want to sync up, 72.5 kilometres to go. Quentin Pache has just gone to 120, Maurice has just gone to 136, the peloton ticks down to 143, and we are now at 72.2 kilometres to go. So, that's where we are if you want to sync up. And basically, every single rider in this peloton is not in sync with each other at all. Attacks are going, counter-attacks are moving. That looked like Arnaud Delis trying to force another move after Wout Van Aert's group slows. But the situation is constantly evolving and has done for the whole stage. If anything, I kind of wish I was around for breakaway formation, even though I've had next to no time to prep for this stream. I've literally done about 2 hours this morning. Feeling absolutely shattered after a long drive, but there we are. Somebody else who's feeling absolutely shattered at the front of the race is Davide Ballerini. And now you've got a vastly reduced group of chasers that have a slim chance of getting across. That is Wout Van Aert, Mathieu Trentin, Dylan Groenewegen, Arnaud Delis and Kamil Gradek of Bahrain Victorious. Delis good for the fantasy team if he can make it across. Groenewegen seemingly fancies his chances if he can keep up with the puncher riders like Van Aert, like Trentin to an extent. Kamil Gradek is probably just there in the group to try and support Fred Wright if he gets to the front of the race. Which, honestly, do I think either of these chase groups are going to get to the front of the race? The answer's no. And as close to the sprint as it is, and with the leading group, especially those three riders who've been out front all day, expending so much energy, this could seriously be brought back before or very near to the sprint. Little Trek, I'm sure, will be interested in getting as many points as they possibly can now that all of their sprinter rivals are out of green jersey contention. So there is an incentive, as I'm seeing another massive group string out in the peloton, but I don't really know what group I'm looking at anymore. So you've got a split in the peloton. Now Simmons goes. And if you're looking at getting into the breakaway, Quinn Simmons is a good one to follow, a good wheel to follow, should I say. A couple of riders have been caught behind a split in the peloton, most notably Matteo Jorgensen, Primoz Roglic, Tobias Johannesson. 3 of the top 10 have been caught behind in a split, so perhaps UAE will start drilling it on the front, especially given that Jorgensen and Yates and Victor Campenaerts have all been dropped. The green jersey as well, Eduardo Affini has been dropped. So this is panic stations a little bit for Visma Lease-A-Bike. The only rider to have been dropped, or riders should I say, to have been dropped from UAE Team Emirates seem to be Adam Yates and Tim Wellens. Will the groups rejoin? If I'm UAE, I am sending Nils Pollitt to the front at this instant, but right now EF have a couple of riders up there, Alpecin have a couple of riders up there, and more splits are taking place around a 90-degree right-hand turn. 10 kilometres to go until the intermediate sprint, and the Pache, Russo, Vermeers trio have been caught by a set of chasers, including Wout Van Aert, Matteo Trentin, De La Groenewegen, Arnaud Delis also in that group, I can see. Airbnb Hotels represented. Quinn Simmons in the group as well as seemingly Harold Tejada on the back. And Van Der Poel is now trying to get across to this Wout Van Aert group. So you might see a scenario now where Van Aert and Van Der Poel are involved in chasing down this front 5-man group. And the splits are being caused. More and more riders flying off the front. That weirdly looks like the yellow jersey. I'm not sure whether it is. But if Ben Healy's been allowed to go up the road like that, we'll see how it goes. Tim Wellens is on the front at the moment. And I'm hearing that this is Jonas Vingegaard attacking with Ben Healy. Jonas Vingegaard has attacked on a flat section with the yellow jersey Ben Healy on what looks to be a punchy sprint stage. Healy and Vingegaard then, seemingly working together. Van Aert turns around, sees the Danish helmet, and wonders what is going on. So despite Visma having many riders caught behind a split in the peloton, they've gone on the offensive. And on the offensive with a rider who we never thought would. They're being chased by Remco Evenepoel, who's bringing this one back for Soudal Quickstep, but Tadej Pogacar looks to be on the back foot and is trying to chase across. This is a massive move from Visma Lease-A-Bike on a flat stage. And for some reason, at this critical juncture in the race, the camera director went back to Kristen Islands at the back of the group, having just received some assistance from the team car. But Pogacar's chased it back. And I concur with Alex Dowsett on comms, who has just said, I have no idea what's going on. And that was a rider who was in this peloton a couple of years ago. So you've got, it looks like 15 to 20 riders in this group. Healy's there, Pogacar's there, Remco is there, Jonas Vingegaard as well. Only looks like he's in the group. And Vingegaard's forcing this on the front, and once again, a gap forms, and once again it's Remco that is reacting. Remco needs the race sense, I think, here, because Pogacar needs to chase these things. It's not down to him. But one rider that is caught behind all of this is Primož Roglič. And I don't think Lipovitz is in the group either. If Lipovitz was in this yellow jersey group, then all hell would break loose in the Bora team bus. But I would enjoy it for the sake of drama. .5 kilometres to go. And I'm struggling to figure out how this is all working. Everybody must be on their knees in the peloton. But the GC favourites have turned this into an important stage for the general classification. So Pogacar is in the group, Jonas is in the group, Healy's in the group, Van Der Poel is in the group, Roglič is not in the group, Only is, Enric Mas is, and I think it's literally just Mas, Only, Remco, Jonas, Tadej and Healy, who are the big GC guys in the sort of top 20 overall that have made it into this group. Which means the likes of Jorgensen, Volkala, Lipovitz and Roglič, Tobias Johannesson as well in the top 10 has not made it across. And it's going to be a chase for them. Red Bull, having brought such a strong team of flat riders and left many hill riders at home, have managed to get into none of these splits. Although that might be why they've taken these guys, to give them, to make sure that Roglič eventually makes it across. But I thought the plan would be more preventative than reactive. On Fantasy Watch at the moment, I've got a couple of riders in this group. The yellow jersey group, Remco Van Der Poel and Arnaud Delis, who has been incredibly active. Perhaps just going for the intermediate sprint based on the way that this stage has been raced and how difficult the upcoming stages are going to be to stay within the time limit. You saw Jonathan Milan early on in the day trying to get into the breakaway to make sure that he took some intermediate sprint points. But yeah, I've got no idea how this stage is going to pan out from this point onwards. What I do have an idea of is, though, that I've missed a couple of days since my last stream. So, might as well get caught up on that right now. Because I don't really know when the next lull is going to be in this stage, because Van Aert, Laurent, Simmons, Van Der Poel and Delis have gone clear of the yellow jersey group. And in all honesty, I've got no idea where I'm going to be able to stop. So here's stage 8. Jonathan Milan won it in a sprint ahead of Wout Van Aert, both of which have tried getting into the breakaway today. Caden Groves 3rd, Ackerman 4th, Delis in 5th, who was one of my riders to watch for that stage, I believe. Followed by Tobias Lund Andersen. Changes, should I say, in the Picnic Post NL ranks for who sprinted on stage 8. Tobias Lund Andersen taking a strong 6th place, with Kukkar on a yellow card in 7th. Alberto Dainese, the last The true sprinters in 8th, with Vincenzo Albanese, the puncher from EF Education EasyPost, slipping into the top 10, not a bad result from him, and Stian Fredheim of UNOX Mobility in 10th. So that was stage 8. Stage 9 was won by a man who did not make it into the top 10 and actually did not get involved in the stage 8 sprint because of a late mechanical. Tim Merlier won stage 9 of the Tour de France ahead of Jonathan Milan, Arnaud Delis in 3rd. So I pretty much nailed the top 3 for that stage. Pavel Bittner back to sprinting for Picnic Postinel, finishes 4th, and once again rubber stamps his name as the Picnic Postinel designated sprinter, I believe. Albeit there's not too many flat stages left in this Tour de France. Paul Pinot finishes 5th after Groupama FDJ chased down Mathieu Van Der Poel and Jonas Vingegaard in the breakaway. Intermarché Wanty also were part of that, and Biniam Diomaye finished 6th, with Phil Bauhaus in 7th for Bahrain Victorious, Meus 8th, Fredheim 9th, and Groves 10th round off that particular stage. And we'll get to stage 10 very shortly, because I've got pictures back, and more riders are attacking. We've got a 5-rider chasing group now of the riders in the lead, and it contains Mathieu Van Der Poel, Quinn Simmons, Axel Laurence, Wout Van Aert, and Arnaud Delis in an incredibly talented quintet. Meanwhile, an attack off the front from Nelson Oliveira has not been followed by anybody, and the peloton look to be blocking everything up once again. The gap is approaching a minute 30 to the leading 5, which is still Fred Wright, Mauro Schmid, Davide Ballerini, Mathieu Bourdou, and Jonas Abrahamsen. And they've got just over 1.5 kilometres to the intermediate sprint at La Bastide-Beauvoir. And I think it would be incredibly interesting to ask any of these front 5 what they know about the race situation, because I'm sure they are blissfully unaware that any of this is going on. Well, they'll be aware because the team car will tell them, but I don't think they'll understand the extent to what was just happening, which I think is the reason why Nils Pollitt was chatting away with Lawrence Pithy and soon to be Danny Van Poppel at the rear of the peloton, trying to work out what is going on. Meanwhile, mechanical for a Lotto rider, Jenno Bergmoes, and he's an important rider for them in this final. They've got Arnaud Delis, their leader, with the number 1 in the team up the road, and in a chasing group that might just get onto this breakaway. They've got 49 seconds to close, and with Van Der Poel and Van Aert in the break, that should be fairly simple. Either way, we're getting close to the intermediate sprint. It should be fairly regulatory between these front 5. Van Der Poel might take an interest because he's 5th in the points classification. Admittedly, 99 points behind Jonathan Milan. And we have a sprint from Jonas Abrahamsen on the left-hand side, followed by Ballerini. Ballerini versus Abrahamsen through the centre. Ballerini cannot get around Jonas Abrahamsen, and the Norwegian takes the intermediate sprint. That was more interesting of a battle than I first thought. And the camera flicks to Tim Merlier, who just is riding his bike and could not care less about what's going on at the front or about his chances at the green jersey, I think. Problem for Arkea B&B Hotels, Raul Garcia Piana with his arm up, wanting assistance from the team car. Arnaud Delis doing it for my fantasy team, sprinting against Quinn Simmons And actually, Quinn Simmons beats Arnaud Delis, which I think is pretty embarrassing for Arnaud Delis, as well as a bad thing for him, having expended energy. And Nelson Oliveira in absolute no man's land crosses the line at the intermediate sprint. I don't think the peloton's going to take too much of an interest. It's totally blocked up behind. 2 minutes 23, the gap to the lead of the race. And in all honesty, this breakaway seems to look like it's going all the way. Ineos slipping Axel Laurence into this breakaway is bold, and a move that seems to have worked out for them, as we're getting a little bit of movement in the peloton, and it's come from Lidl Trek, who have one lead outrider at the front of the race, followed by the green jersey Jonathan Milan, who sets off now in search of intermediate sprint points. Biniam Girmay in the wheel of the Italian. Can he get out of Milan's wheel? Into the barriered section now. Girmay, one last push to the line. Cannot make it around Jonathan Milan. And once again, Jonathan Milan outsprints Biniam Girmay for minor placings at the intermediate sprint. I don't really know why they were sprinting for such minor points. I mean, I respect going for every point you possibly can get. But no, Abrahamsen takes the bottle at the front of this race for Uno X, splashes it on his back, and forward comes Davide Ballerini to the front of the race, taking a pull. And now you've got another group trying to bridge. Two Israel Premier Tech riders are forcing another group away, just passing Jonathan Milan and Biniam Girmay right now. Of course, they have missed both of these groups. We've got plenty of teams represented. Of course, 5 at the front of the race from 5 different teams. But 5 teams separate from the front of the race in the chase, as well as Nelson Oliveira. So if all of these front 3 groups merge, then you will have 11 riders from 11 different teams at the front. Abrahamsen takes 20 then at the intermediate sprint, followed by Ballerini on 17. And the important names you will need to know are Jonathan Milan taking 4, Girmay taking 3, Consonni 2, and Anthony Turgis 1 from the peloton. So again, Turgis, Girmay and Jonathan Milan are the only 3 riders interested in intermediate sprint points still at this stage. For a brief time, Tim Merlier showed an interest, but that is not the case anymore. And the average speed of this race is just touching over 50 kilometres an hour. There's going to be no problems staying within the time limit, despite such a fast race at the moment. Mainly because it is so flat, of course. But there were problems, or there was a little bit of worry amongst some riders and the previous stage about getting in time for the time limit. The stage was stage 10. It was 4 hours, 20 minutes in the saddle for Simon Yates, who was the eventual stage winner, winning from the breakaway for Visma Lease-A-Bike. Timo Arendsman, good ride from him, kept his nose clean and away from the wind for the Ineos Grenadiers. He was in second at 9 seconds down. And Ben Healy with the ride of his career, going into third position on the stage, but that was not what he was after. 31 seconds down on Simon Yates, but he was more interested in the two riders in 9th and 10th on the day. Ben O'Connor was 4th, the only other rider within a minute of Simon Yates. His countryman Michael Storer 5th for Tudor at 1:23. Joe Blackmore 3:57. All of these final three are riders that were dropped from the breakaway earlier than the leading 5, who came together on the final climb. Anders Johannesson 7th through No X Mobility on 4:38, and then Lenny Martinez dragging Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard with him. Or should I say, Pogacar and Vingegaard just looking at each other, going so slowly that actually Martinez overtook them on the final climb, who was on his hands and knees by the time the stage finished. He'd had a nosebleed, he had blood all over him, but he crossed the line in 8th, Pogacar 9th and Vingegaard 10th at 4 minutes 51, which meant that this is what the general classification looked like going into today's stage. We have a new yellow jersey, Ben Healy of EF Education EasyPost, 29 seconds clear of Tadej Pogacar, and 29 seconds that could have easily been caught up had Pogacar seriously been interested in keeping the yellow jersey. Clearly he wasn't, and wanted really to give it away based on what he was saying before the stage to Ben Healy. Remco Evenepoel sits 3rd overall, a minute behind Pogacar and a minute 29 behind Ben Healy, with Jonas Vingegaard at 1 minute 46 behind Ben Healy and 1 minute 16 behind Tadej Pogacar. Matteo Jorgensen 2 minutes 6 in 5th, with Kevin Vauquelin, the big loser of stage 10, dropping down to 6th at 2 minutes and 26 seconds behind Ben Healy. Good ride again from Onley, who had a really positive first week and ended it off very well in 7th overall at 3 minutes 24, followed by Florian Lipovitz and Primoz Roglic of Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe within 7 seconds of each other, and Tobias Johannesson hanging on to a top 10 on 5 minutes and 3 seconds down. So that's our general classification. And just to go full circle and make sure that we've covered everything, here are the other classifications. Jonathan Milan is of course in the green points jersey, ahead of Tadej Pogacar in 2nd and Biniam Girmay in 3rd. The minor points given out to Milan and Girmay won't move the needle in that classification at all. Lenny Martinez is wearing the polka dot jersey, currently sitting 11 points clear of yellow jersey wearer Ben Healy, with Michael Woods 16 points behind Martinez in 3rd. Healy, in leading the yellow jersey, also leads the white jersey, but Remco Evenepoel will wear that kit. He's just under 1.5 minutes behind Ben Healy, of course, with Vauquelin at 2 minutes 26 in 3rd, and Florian Lipovitz dropping to 4th in that particular classification, the German rider on Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe. So, back to the race we go. 5-rider leading group, Bergerdo, Schmid, Abrahamsen, Wright and Ballerini. They've been out front for most of the day, certainly the case of Abrahamsen, Ballerini and Mauro Schmid. Then you've got a 5-rider chase, Arnaud Delis, Mathieu Van Der Poel, Quinn Simmons, Axel Laurence and Wout Van Aert, as Nelson Oliveira gets reeled in by the peloton. The sole other chaser then is gone, which means you've got 2 groups now, and a situation that I think I can just about wrap my head around. None of these guys too interested in the general classification, of course. Closest guy of the front 10 is Mathieu Van Der Poel, and he's approaching half an hour down. Israel Premier Tech have missed this breakaway and are putting 2 riders at the head of the race to try and perhaps chase it down. Perhaps it's just a punishment for missing the breakaway. You can't blame Chris Nylands for it, I'm afraid, because he was down with the cars when the main attacks went, and probably is huffing and puffing to stay in the peloton. But no, this is one of the few stages that Israel Premier Tech could have benefited from, and they have totally missed it. Because the 10 teams at the front at the moment are Total Energy, Jayco, Uno X, Bahrain Victorious, and Astana in the leading group, and then Alpecin, Lidl Trek, Ineos Grenadiers, Visma Lease-A-Bike, and Lotto in the chase. But with 2 minutes and 33 of a gap between the peloton and the leading group, this is not going to be closed by Israel Premier Tech. So I've got no idea why they're pacing on the front. Right now, though, attention will turn to the Col de Montgiscard. It arrives with 45.2 kilometres left in the stage, so it will be summited in about 4 kilometres time. It's 1.7 kilometres in length, 5.3% average gradient for a Category 4 label. Jonas Abrahamsen won the first categorised climb of the day and picked up 1 point. Can he do the same on this Category 4? As Alex Baudin involved in a puncture for EF Education EasyPost, teammate now of the yellow jersey. And if anything, it's probably been a blessing in disguise that Richard Carapaz has not been selected for the Tour de France. But with the gap well over a minute, forward will come the team cars for Visma Lease-A-Bike and Alpecin Deceuninck. Might offer an opportunity for one of the Israel Premier Tech riders to launch a move using the draft of the car and try and drag a couple more riders with them. Because with the way that this breakaway has eventually formed, I think the chasing group, now 35 seconds away from the head of the race, have a very good chance at winning the stage. Davide Ballerini's looked in trouble for most of the day. Fred Wright handing over to the Italian at the head of the group. And the only national champion of the leading 10 riders, or should I say one of the two, is Mauro Schmid, Swiss national champion for Jayco AlUla, who has been, I think he's been seen quite a lot, certainly by me. He's been on camera quite a bit across this Tour de France, despite not really doing too much. This is the first day where he's properly got involved in the race. Same really for Davide Ballerini. Jonas Abrahamsen has been quiet but has been involved in moves. The problem, I guess, was that he came into last year's Tour so on fire that, and the year before, that he had high expectations. Fred Wright as well was involved briefly in getting Lenny Martinez into a couple of breakaways, but hasn't been in a breakaway of his own, so this is another chance for Fred Wright to have a crack at being in the break. Mathieu Van Der Poel won a combativity prize with Matteo Verchet in a 2-up attack, where both riders won the combativity prize. I want to say that was stage 8. Again, I could have probably told you this at the click of a fingers had it not been for my brief breakaway. I had a breakaway of my own, am I right? But Israel Premier Tech are continuing pacing at the head of the peloton. Unless they really believe in Jake Stewart's sprinting abilities from a reduced group, this is a move that I do not understand from IPT. Either way, the first of 4 climbs in the final 45 kilometres, the Côte de Montgiscard, 1.6 kilometres, 5.3% average gradient, and 1 point to be handed out over the top. Lenny Martinez is safe, at least for today, in the polka dot jersey. But Jonas Abrahamsen looks like he's out for points. Hand up from Quinn Simmons after a water bottle. Infamously the Healy day on stage 10, where he was in the breakaway. He did not have a team car, so was picking up bottles from various team cars from different squads, because they had two back with Jonathan Milan. Rather selfish of the Italian. But it meant that Quinn Simmons was at the front of the race and did not have any assistance whatsoever, so he could have had a mechanical and dropped back to the peloton. In the end, he was in the eventual winning breakaway. Attacked early and ended up blowing up very early because Ben Healy was only interested in the general classification. We're about halfway through the Côte de Montgiscard for the breakaway. The peloton are just about to enter the climb. It's not going to be too hefty. For the peloton, the important tests come later in the stage. They get gradually more and more difficult until you get to the final climb of the Côte de Pêche David. There was a couple of words from Benjamin Thomas, who summed up the stage quite nicely, of course, from the local area, riding for Cofidis, which we'll get to once I get to some more ads. But right now, Israel Premier Tech are continuing their quest to neutralise this breakaway. In the end, Alpecin Deceuninck are latching onto the rear, and Israel getting onto the radio. Plenty of discussions, probably why are we doing this at the moment. Ballerini is out the saddle. Is he going to be sprinting for the solitary point? Or is he just hanging on to the rear of this leading group and making sure he gets over the climb with the other four riders at the head of the race? If anything, dropping back to the Van Der Poel group might be a blessing in disguise, because they're all fresh and they're all better riders probably than the leading five. As it's Fred Wright that may just take the point over the climb, unless Jonas Abrahamsen makes a sprint from third wheel. And indeed, Fred Wright will take 1 point. Then you'd get, if you were playing the Tour de France game, a radio message from your team director saying, well done, you've taken points from the rest of the breakaway to keep our boy in polka dots. And Van Der Poel is going to lead the second group over the top of the second climb of the day. And as soon as he does, hands over to the head-bobbing Arnaud Delis, who is going to be the most dangerous in a sprint if these groups come together, you would think. But with the amount of kilojoules in the legs, as Soudal Quickstep send a radio, it's been already a rough day for everybody. Stay hard in the head. The Tour has no mercy for nobody. Come on, boys, says Soudal Quickstep. And what does Remco Evenepoel have cooking up? Because he's been following the Jonas Vingegaard moves as of recent. Accelerations and surges that he didn't need to make, because that could have been Tadej Pogacar's job. As Ballerini wants some hydration from the Astana team car. He doesn't get it from the Astana team car. Instead, he gets it from Shimano Neutral Service. And there are multiple teams that will be ruining the fact that they've got no riders in this breakaway. Cofidis will be one of them. Another one of these teams will be Groupama FDJ, despite trying with Clément Rousseau and Quentin Pache. They've not managed to get anybody in the break. Israel Premier Tech, so clearly irked by the fact that they've got no riders in this breakaway that they're chasing it down themselves. Alongside Alpecin Deceuninck, which I'm confused about. I get that they were chasing the breakaway down to get Van Der Poel in the move, but now Van Der Poel is in a chasing group. Alpecin Deceuninck have gone back to the lead of the peloton. So unless they really believe in one of their options for the day, whether that be Zandra Murisa or Emil Verstringer, then I don't understand why they're doing it. Two of the leaders' jerseys at the back of the peloton at the moment. The polka dot jersey of Lenny Martinez being the rider right at the rear, and on the wheel of Jonathan Milan. That's a case of large, little and large. Bottles being handed out by the neutral service motorbike. As we get the artsy slow-mos of Fred Wright, who is finally getting involved in a Tour de France breakaway of his own. He's been semi-active in getting Lenny Martinez up the road on a couple of occasions, but good to see Fred Wright up there, especially because I've picked him for later stages. As Mathieu Van Der Poel, who actually has his race number on his helmet. That's the first time I've noticed that for Total Energy. It's actually quite nice. But a couple of riders requiring some assistance from the team car, namely Tom Schroens, who is getting involved in the early moves of this particular stage, which would have been nice for my fantasy team had he got in them. And Danny Van Poppel of Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe. One of the riders that would have been panicking when Jonas Vingegaard made his move and the splits occurred in the peloton. Because Roglic and Lipovitz were caught napping there. And it's not the first time that's happened. Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe seemingly not learning from their lessons earlier in this Tour de France. Two Belgians, though, in the chasing group. No Belgians at the head of the race for now. But they are two incredibly talented Belgians. Two incredibly talented sprinters as well. Wout Van Aert and Arnaud Delis. Axel Laurent could join his countryman Mathieu Van Der Poel up front. And he's got... Axel Laurent is in this chase group for Ineos Grenadiers. Quinn Simmons, of course, the American national champion there for Lidl Trek. And Mathieu Van Der Poel will be the sole Dutchman at the head of the race if he makes it there. Which he should, because the gap is 23 seconds to our leading five. And we're on to the next climb. The Côte du Cornsac. 900 metres, 6.7% average gradient, which is a distinct increase compared to the previous climb, the Côte de Montgiscard. And although it is around just over half the distance of the previous climb, its increase in gradient still gives it Category 4 label. So another point to be handed out for the rider that will, quite frankly, roll over the top. I don't think there'll be a sprint by any means amongst these front five. And this is the way it's going to be until we get to the finish line. Or those final 5 to 10 kilometres into Toulouse. It's going to be up and down constantly. Ever fluctuating gradients. Uphill followed by downhill, followed by uphill, followed by downhill. But it's a great ride from these leading 5 who have kept the gap at 30 seconds for a while now. It's finally beginning to come down. 26 seconds, but the leading 5 will go over the top of this climb together without being caught by the chasers. And I believe again, it's going to be the Bahrain victorious jersey of Fred Wright, who will receive no challenge from Davide Ballerini sat second wheel. Jonas Abrahamsen definitely not getting involved at the back of the leading group. But 5 riders continue to chase. Axel Laurence has been fairly quiet. He's the only rider I've not seen at the front of this group. But they do seem to be rotating okay, despite the gap not really being eaten into too heavily. But again, Israel Premier Tech have sent riders to the front. This is Chris Nylands pacing up the 3rd from last climb. And the next climb we will get to, the next categorised one, should I say, because there are multiple risers in the road from this point onwards, will be the Category 4 Côte de Vielle Toulouse, 6.8% average for 1.3 kilometres, so it's steeper than this and also longer than this climb. But Nylands looks to be going flat out and clearly pacing an effort that he can do for a decent amount of time. Always posts his Strava data to Instagram after the stage has finished. So this one might see a higher average wattage than usual, given that he's going to be on the front. But the Nylands pace is putting a couple of riders in difficulty. Most notably Paul Penouet and the green jersey of Jonathan Milan. So the acceleration in the group from Nylands is seeing the end of the day for a couple of sprinters. Penouet, Milan and Consoni off the back. That's their day done. And Nylands is continuing to crush the pedals up the Grand Sac. At the moment, everything looks fine. I think it was actually Thibaut Nace with Jonathan Milan. Which is surprising because Nace has been very poor across this Tour de France. And everybody else remains in the peloton. It's been a bold call from Israel Premier Tech to send riders to the front to try and make sure that the 10 riders in front of the peloton don't get given too much time. But if Jake Stewart can pay them back with a win, or whoever they are in fact going for, it could be a Louvel day to get into the break. It's definitely not going to be Pascal Ackermann's day with the way they're pacing up the risers at the moment. But they've got a couple of other riders that could work. I thought Nylands would be somebody that they could go for at the end of today's stage, but Lutsenko looks a little bit out of form based on his stage 10 performance. Blackmore, of course, was in the top 10 on stage 10, so it's probably not going to get involved, and so was Woods involved in the breakaway. Which means Guillaume Boivin is the only other option they've got, and I think he will be riding for Jake Stewart. But Buitrago now dropped off the rear of the peloton. Brief time involved in the breakaway for Santiago Buitrago. However, it's becoming very quickly a tour to forget for the Colombian. But here's your leading 10 as we approach the final few kilometres of the day. And here's what today looks like in a little bit more detail. We've had about 120 kilometres of the day. Not long to go until we get to Toulouse, where there is, I believe, a short circuit. But a couple of climbs, and nasty ones at that, still left to go. The Côte de Vielle-Toulouse, 1.3 kilometres, 6.8% average gradient, followed by the Côte de Pêche-David, about 9 kilometres before the end of the stage. 800 metres, 12.4%, but it kicks up to 21% early on in the climb, before flattening out. So it means that you've got to keep an eye, perhaps, on the sprinters that could make it up after all of that attrition at the head of the race, which is why my ones to watch are a little bit different. Here was our ones to watch on stage 6, which I can't believe that was our last stream. It was the one that Ben Healy won. Mathieu Van Der Poel was involved in the breakaway and moved into the yellow jersey, so I'm taking that as a win for me on the ones to watch scale. Matej Mohoric was not involved, and neither was Remco Evenepoel, who did not instigate any attacks. It was only Pogacar right at the end that attempted a surge. But I'll take the Van Der Poel win. I'm having that as a big tick in my ones to watch for stage 6. And here are my ones to watch on stage 11. Jonathan Milan, we've already finished watching because he's out of the rear of the peloton. I was just interested to see how far he'd make it into those final couple of climbs. A rider who should be a better climber than Milan is Biniam Girmay, and I had him as my pick for the stage, at least early on. However, I don't really think that it's going to happen. Having looked at the profile in a bit more detail, I doubt it's going to be the case. He's still in the peloton, but I may have underestimated a couple of these climbs, which is why my third option is Vincenzo Albanese. If they don't use him, EF Education EasyPost, to help Ben Healy, I think he's got a serious chance at finishing highly because he's a good sprinter, was in the top 10 of the previous sprint stage, and can absolutely get over climbs. He's more of a puncher, so that's why I've gone for him. So we're about to get team radio from Visma Lease-A-Bike, who say with the racing like this, it will be a mega hard day in the final. The hardest part is still to come. Try to do a little bit of saving of your energy, guys. So Visma clearly are looking at attacking this late part of the stage, or are expecting other teams to attack the late part of the stage too. They've got Wout Van Aert in the breakaway, and a breakaway that at the moment looks like it might go all the way, which is going to hurt the legs of Davide Ballerini, Mauro Schmid and Jonas Abrahamsen, who've been out front pretty much since the flag drop. But the leading group is still holding off the chasers right about now. And it's mainly, I think, Fred Wright and Mathieu Bergadeau that are putting in the hard turns. They kind of have to, after having to bridge across. But more and more riders are going to fall by the wayside in the peloton, with the gradient persistently changing. We've got ourselves already a gruppetto forming, with the likes of Jonathan Milan and a couple of the other sprinters. Lenny Martinez in the polka dot jersey is also there, perhaps preparing for an attack on tomorrow's stage. Pavel Bittner has fallen behind, as well as Tim Merlier. So lots of sprinters left behind already. Arnaud Demart for Arkea B&B Hotels, who has been utterly silent That's the first time I've actually said his name, I think, on these streams. And Jordi Meeus, who has been in the top 10, but has been equally, really, away from the spotlight. Of course, won in Paris on the Champs-Élysées in what was a shock victory for the Belgian, but has not been able to replicate any of that form in this year's race. We've covered 124 kilometres, there's 33 left of the stage, and Wout Van Aert leads the chasing quintet, including a Quinn Simmons, who is being chased now by an American team. The American national champion, EF Education EasyPost, are on the front, as our Caribbean hotels have a mechanical problem. That is Amaury Capio, who is receiving a new bike. And he will get back underway fairly quickly. But no, Capio back in the race now and is back on course. He might as well look behind him, see that his sprint leader Arnaud Demar has been dropped from the peloton, and will just wait up for him and ride it in with the gruppetto. One team that are not content with riding it in are Groupama FDJ, who have upped the tempo at the head of the peloton. Visma Lease-A-Bike did say it was going to be attritional in the final. Maybe not this early, but Groupama FDJ looking to cause some damage. They've got plenty of options on this kind of stage. You're looking at a puncher sprinter, I think, who is quick in a small group. And Groupama FDJ have plenty of options in that regard. Guillaume Martin is not one of those. He's their GC leader, who has been involved in a couple of breakaways, but none of which have come off. Mainly, their man for the day is going to be Romain Grégoire, who has proved early on in this race that he can mix it with the best. 2 top 5 finishes already at this Tour de France for Grégoire. 4th on stage 2, 5th on stage 4, of course. And a rider with a serious kick on him when it comes to a smaller group sprint. Will he be able to beat the likes of Pogacar? If it goes to a stage win, I don't see Pogacar getting involved if there's no bonus seconds to be won. But the bonus seconds may well go to the breakaway, because the gap remains at 2 minutes and 17 seconds with 31.3 kilometres to go. Now, usually, that would mean goners for the breakaway. But with 5 riders looking to latch on to a leading group of 5, and with the stage being as difficult as it has been, I think riders will be running out of puff by the end of today's stage. EF have plenty of their team still to use, if Ben Healy fancies going for the stage win, or anybody else in that team for that matter. The likes of Vincenzo Albanese and Nilsson Paulus spring to mind. Kasper Asgreen would have been a lock for a breakaway on this stage had he not been in the team of the yellow jersey. But right now, it's the blue with the red sleeve of Groupama FDJ who are trying to pull the peloton along right now. Davide Ballerini has a wobble. I think it was one of those sort of fun, I'm a little bit bored wobbles that you do on the bike occasionally when things get a little bit dull. It's been far from dull, really, but the dullest place you can be, I suppose, is in the breakaway because you've missed all the action going on behind you. And the action remains behind you because 22 seconds is the gap to an elite set of 5 riders that are chasing. Axel Laurence, big puncher, former under-23 national champion as well, won that race in Glasgow in 2023. Quinn Simmons, who has proven in this Tour de France that he is a serious engine and has finished second on a stage already to Ben Healy at this Tour before, stage 6 in particular, but also a 2-time American road race national champion and winner of the Tour de Wallonie in 2021. And then you get to the bigger names who have won at higher levels. Mainly, Arnaud Delis. We'll get him out of the way first because the other 2 riders he's with are, quite frankly, levels above in terms of palmares that they've already built up. But Delis is a rider on the way up, 23 years of age, winner of GP Quebec in 2023. And that was the result, really, that meant he burst onto the scene. Admittedly, it was only beating Corbin Strong, as a radio message comes through for Arnaud Delis, says, "You're doing today, it's not over yet, you're with champions, you are a champion, and you're going to get a top result today for your wife too, and your whole family." So they're offering some inspiration to Delis, whose best seasons have not come this year. Hit a real purple patch in 2023 and 2024, but has not really replicated that in 2025 as of late. He's grown into this Tour de France though, and has got a stage at Étoile de Bessèges earlier this year, of course. Latest result in a sprint for Arnaud Delis is 3rd, and the result before that was 5th, so he's growing in confidence as this Tour comes along. And I think being involved in this chasing group is a sign that his confidence is especially high. But other riders at the front of the race we haven't touched upon as of yet. Mathieu Van Der Poel, who has got results in his career as well on the French circuit, most notably for Total Energy. Van Der Poel, a 26-year-old rider, and they call him the B-Tech Alaphilippe. I think Alaphilippe is the B-Tech Alaphilippe at this point. No slight on him, he's just, I think, gradually making his way out of the sport, but doing it with panache in a typical Julian Alaphilippe way. Van Der Poel's best result came at Paris-Nice, and that was a couple of years ago now, when he won a stage of that race, and has been a mainstay of the many iterations of Total Energy. His big win came from a sprint or a large group, holding off the likes of Mads Pedersen, Wout Van Aert and Biniam Girmay sprinting behind him. But that was the peak of Mathieu Van Der Poel's achievements. Winning that stage at Paris-Nice, has also finished second at the Britannia Classic in 2023 behind Valentin Madouas. So a good classics rider as well as a stage hunter in stage races. Mauro Schmid, fairly obvious by the massive plus on his back, is the Swiss national champion of the road race this year, but has been involved in plenty of other victories for his nation, most notably in the team time trial event at the 2023 World Championships. Also has won a Giro d'Italia stage, and that was back in 2021 for Quebecer Nextash. Remember that team? That's a throwback. And that was the victory which really catapulted Mauro Schmid into the mainstream. After that, into 2022, won the Baloise Belgium Tour and a stage of the Copé Bartoli, as well as being involved in 2 winning mixed relay world championship teams, and is a 2-time road race winner of the Swiss National Championships, and also took the ITT this year, with Stefan Kung not around. But has taken big wins across his career, really. Cadel Evans road race this year, one of them, and the Baloise Belgium Tour overall in 2022. holding off some serious competition. Tim Wellens, Quinton Hermans, Lorenzo Rota, Victor Campenaerts, massive engines. He's been able to hold off, so is a good rider to have in this breakaway. Jonas Abrahamsen, needs no introduction really. A rider who is very, very well known for doing this sort of thing, the 29-year-old Norwegian. Doesn't take big wins at his career. His biggest win was probably at the Brussels Classic, winning alone ahead of Biniam Girmay and Caden Groves, who won the sprint from the peloton. But a solo effort to win the Brussels Classic last year. Not a prolific winner by any means, and tends to focus on individual classifications in stage races, but has had a couple of decent results this year, 7th at Dwarsdorp het Hageland, but is mostly used in a teammate role and is a big, big engine in his own right. Speaking of right, Fred is up front, which I'm very happy about because I'm a big fan of Fred Wright and his work, the 26-year-old Brit, who has had multiple top 10s at the Ronde van Vlaanderen in 2022 and 23, finished 9th at Paris-Roubaix this year. Superb classics rider and a former British national champion back in 2023. This year, of course, Roubaix his best result, but finished second on the second stage of the Criterium de Dauphiné, out-sprinting Mathieu Van Der Poel and finishing behind Jonathan Milan, but has been in and around the top 10 of plenty of classics this year as well, Fred Wright. And finally, Davide Ballerini, who back at Quick-Step was a serious threat when it came to hilly sprints, which is this sort of terrain really. He's gone a little bit off the boil since joining Astana in 2024 and did previously race for the Kazakh outfit, but his best years came at Quick-Step, winning Omloop Het Nieuwsblad in 2021 is probably the best result he took on his career. Little bit of a big early season rider. Really enjoys performing well early on. Took 2 stages of the Tour de la Provence in 2021 and then the Omloop Het Nieuwsblad that same year. That was probably his best ever purple patch as a rider, but has not won anything since the 2022 Coppa Bernocchi in October of that year. So it's almost 3 years without a professional victory for Davide Ballerini, who is a good sprinter when it comes down to a small group. And that completes your 10 riders at the front who have not yet joined up with one another. And I think the 5 riders leading the way understand that they have no chance of winning with Van Der Poel, Van Aert and Arnaud Delis in the group. Because if it goes to a sprint, Arnaud Delis and Van Aert should dust them. And if it goes to a puncher, Van Der Poel, Quinn Simmons, Axel Laurence should have their day. Van Aert as well, if he is in form. So these 5 are probably all working together to try to ensure that they get to the line on their own, because it vastly increases their chances of victory. But as the gap approaches 3 minutes, with EF Education EasyPost more than happy to let this go, it's going to be a stage for the breakaway riders. Despite how sort of awfully unclear it was to work out who was getting into the breakaway early on, it will eventually go to the break. Not much cooperation amongst the riders that were interested in getting up the road. But in the end, it's going to make it all the way. Which group will do that, though? Arnaud Delis takes a bottle from the Lotto car. He's very close to getting over this short rise. And once he gets over that, it will be a descent briefly and a short flat section into the Côte de Vielle Toulouse. By the time they've crested that, there'll be less than 15 kilometres remaining in the day. But that particular climb, 1.3 kilometres in length, 6.8% average gradient, and a chance to thin out your competition before the final climb, or gain an advantage on riders that should drop you over the Côte de Pêche David, because that is the main difficulty of the day, the sole Category 3 climb on the stage. So far we've done 3 Category 4 tests, we've got 1 more remaining, and it's Mauro Schmid that leads the way in the breakaway group at the moment. Hands over right now to Mathieu Van Der Poel. 2 very talented hill riders. But when you go to the Tour de France, you can be an incredibly talented rider and just be engulfed in all of this quality. And I think that's best proven by the 5 riders sitting behind the leading group, of which Wout Van Aert raises the tempo and Axel Laurens is fighting to stay onto the rear. His team, Ineos Grenadiers, is about to send a team radio which says, "This group will take the stage win, Axel. Be smart, be tough, and trust your instincts." You can win this, they say to Axel Laurens. And he is a rider that trusted his instincts, certainly at the Under-23 World Championships in Glasgow, where he attacked from afar and took the stage win. Or took the rainbow bands, should I say. And I think I agree with Zach Dempster that the win is going to come from one of those 5 riders. But it is going to be a real dogfight between the leading 10, I think. The front 5 are making this incredibly hard, despite all of their efforts. Fred Wright struggling, misses a turn. Mauro Schmid sighs, rolls his eyes, and slots back into the train in front of Fred Wright. 20 seconds between the head of the race and the group of Van Der Poel. So that tempo raise from Wout Van Aert has only cut around 6 to 10 seconds to the head of the race, who are continuing their conquest to try and topple the second 5 on the road. Now the lactic acid will really be building in the legs of Mauro Schmid, Davide Ballerini and Jonas Abrahamsen. Fred Wright and Mathieu Van Der Poel as well have now been at the front for long enough for it to really start to be fatiguing to them. And once again, accelerations are taking place. Van Der Poel and Simmons trying to stay on the wheel of Arnaud Delis. Simmons looks over his right shoulder, asks Van Der Poel to come through, and he does. Wout Van Aert looks over his right shoulder at Arnaud Delis. Brief chat between the 2 Belgians. And Quinn Simmons is skipping turns now. Laurens forces Simmons to go in front of him for Ineos Grenadiers, which means we could see that horrible Total Energy advertising. Although, is it horrible if it does its job? And right now, at the front of the peloton, they are small screening. Visma Lease-A-Bike are on the right-hand side with their train. EF Education EasyPost through the centre with Picnic Postenel. And I think that's the Cathlonage Désert. Yes, it is. So, multiple teams coming towards the front with their given trains. Axel Laurens shaking the legs out. Will be a big scalp for Ineos Grenadiers if they can win the stage today. They've come close already on stage 10. That's probably been their only time that they've properly been near to a stage win. And that came with their talented Dutch climber, who I mean, both of their GC options, Carlos Rodriguez and Timo Arendsman, have fumbled the GC bag quite drastically. Arendsman, though, recovers to take second on what I'm calling yesterday's stage, is stage 10, before the rest day. So Ineos seem to be growing into this tour. They've been trying to get the likes of Sam Watson involved in the sprints, but at the moment he's not experienced enough in those situations to poke his nose into the top 10. Axel Laurence, though, is quick, especially quick on steep gradients, which we will get on the Côte de Pêche David. But before that is the Côte de Vielle Toulouse, which the breakaway is about to enter. Tim Wellens, with a bottle in his mouth, is dropped off the rear of the peloton. Probably doesn't need to do any more work today to keep Tadej Pogacar safe, as we are well into the final 20 kilometres now. I think he's going to try to get back on, but I don't think it's the end of the world if UAE Team Emirates lose Wellens. They've still got the likes of Pollitt and Marc Soler to control, but they preferably have the Belgian national champion back with them. So Van Aert has been given freedom. Trina Hansen will not be impressed, but will be impressed if Jonas Vingegaard takes time on Tadej Pogacar, as will I. Especially on a stage like this, which was never circled as a chance for GC favourites to put time into one another. But it's not been for the want of trying. After seeing Remco Evenepoel close multiple gaps to Jonas Vingegaard's accelerations and splits being caused by the Dane, and Ben Healy actually, who has enjoyed his day in yellow, I think, despite how difficult it's been. But the breakaway now are onto the Côte de Vielle Toulouse, 1.3 kilometres, 6.8% average. And it's going to be tough, especially after all of the kilometres and hard kilometres, because it's not been a long stage, but it's been an incredibly hard-fought one. Laurence takes a bottle from the Ineos Grenadiers team car and propels himself back onto the rear of the chase group, which can just about see the support cars up ahead. And the front five are continuing to hold these guys off for now, which is surprising because we've got to the hillier section and you've got some of the elite hill riders in the world in this second group. Bergerdo, Schmid, Wright, Ballerini and Abrahamsen, all good in their own right on hills, but I wouldn't call any of them Mathieu Van Der Poel, Wout Van Aert, maybe even Axel Laurence on his day. But what they have done is worked incredibly well together. Wright skipped a few relays on occasion, but everybody's doing hard turns on the front in the leading group. And it's going to mean that the chasers have to put in some accelerations to try and get onto the rear of this leading group. While Van Aert at the moment leads the way, hands over to Mathieu Van Der Poel. Arnaud Delis will be the next rider to hit the wind. Although Delis leaves the gap open for Van Der Poel and Van Aert to do a two-up chase. Advantage then Quinn Simmons and Axel Laurence, and advantage Quinn Simmons, who hits the nitro button, and the American national champion makes his move. Mauro Schmid realises it, looks behind, understands what's going on and raises the tempo in the leading group. Arnaud Delis rocking, rolling, weaving, bobbing, trying to get onto the wheel of Quinn Simmons. Similar style to Ben Healy, you cannot afford to let Simmons get a gap. Takes an inch, turns it into a mile. And Arnaud Delis, being the best pure sprinter in this group, will want everything to be closed down and is doing it himself for the moment. But a massive acceleration from Simmons. He's not made it over to the leading group, which have now lost Davide Ballerini. He's been on the struggle bus all day. And Fred Wright is doing the same, as is Mathieu Bergadeau. So we've got a 2-rider leading group now. This is not really what Jonas Abrahamsen and Mauro Schmid would have wanted, but it's what they're going to have to deal with. Over the top goes Abrahamsen. He takes the singular point over the Côte de Vie Toulouse. Now you've got to start the timer and wait for Quinn Simmons, who goes over now of the 4th category climb. And he's got about 5 seconds on the other 4 riders in the chase, who have been joined by Davide Ballerini, managed to get over the climb with those guys, and will hang on to them down the descent and onto the brief flat section before the Côte de Pêche David. And this is the opportunity for Mauro Schmid and Jonas Abrahamsen to make as much time as they possibly can before the savage percentages of the Côte de Pêche David. They're going to have to widen this gap as much as they can, with the ongoing threat of Quinn Simmons sat behind them, waiting for his opportunity to accelerate again up the savage percentages. Fred Wright trying to hang on to the wheel of the American national champion. Mathieu Bergadeau just ahead, probably providing a carrot on a stick for Quinn Simmons to chase. Carrot, of course, bought from Lidl. But it's Mauro Schmid and Jonas Abrahamsen that are proving to be the best of the breakaway. 2 very good classics riders in their own right, as is Simmons, as is Van Der Poel and Wout Van Aert. Arnaud Delis loves farming a .1 Belgian classic as well. But the Tour de France is a completely different kettle of fish. Right now, he's managed to stay with Laurens Van Der Poel and Wout Van Aert, but all 3 of those guys have been distanced by Quinn Simmons' acceleration. Riders struggling to hang on to the peloton at the moment, including, for Lidl Trek, Matthias Skjelmose, hanging around the rear of the peloton. That's not a great sign for him. He's moving his way up, though. But 15th on GC, looks like he's struggling ever so slightly. Schmid and Abrahamsen are absolutely shattered. They almost crashed each other there, as Abrahamsen latches onto the wheel of Mauro Schmid. Both of these riders have a chance at winning their first ever Tour de France stage. Schmid, of course, a Grand Tour stage winner back in 2021 at the Giro d'Italia. On the gravel as well, nonetheless. This, an equally difficult stage. Maybe not in profile, but in the way it's been raced. And at the end, it's going to come down to who's got the best legs to win the stage, I think, rather than who's got the best tactics. This has been a pure battle of grit between all of these 10 riders in the lead. Yes, you've had riders attacking later on, but our initial 5 have done superbly well to hold off Simmons, Van Der Poel, Van Aert, etc. This gap is just not being closed quickly enough by Wout Van Aert, Mathieu Van Der Poel, Arnaud Delis and Axel Laurens. And the same can be said for Quinn Simmons. Fred Wright is not going to pull a turn for the American national champion. He's just going to sit on the wheel of the little Trek rider, because he knows, and Quinn Simmons will know, that Wright is shattered, as is the leading duo, and I think basically everybody that's involved in a breakaway at the moment. Abrahamsen continues to press on the front. the 10 kilometre to go sign will, I think, both be a relief and also a scary prospect, because very shortly we'll begin the climb of the Côte de Pêche David. It will begin with 9.7 to go. So very, very shortly for the leading group, Schmid and Abrahamsen will make a right turn 90 degrees, and they will be at the foot of this savage 800 metre climb. 12.4% average, but the really steep percentages come at the start. Abrahamsen takes a slightly better line through the corner, slower in but faster out, and that means he's now on the front. Mauro Schmid fighting to hold the wheel. Abrahamsen taking the momentum into the climb, but Mauro Schmid strong enough to stay on the rear wheel of the Uno X rider. The powerful Norwegian up against the equally powerful Swiss rider. Simmons also onto the climb now with Fred Wright and Mathieu Bergadeau, as we see Axel Laurence trying to slide up the inside of Arnaud Delis. Wout Van Aert gets the corner slightly wrong, goes slightly too far wide. Van Der Poel got it just right. And Ballerini still hanging on, which I think shows you the pace in this group on the descent and on the valley road before this final climb. And now it is especially important to watch the time gaps. These are where the steepest percentages are at the foot of the climb. Once they get over that part, which Schmid and Abrahamsen have, they will be on to slighter gradients. 25 seconds to Quinn Simmons. But how much can you trust the time gaps? They are parts of the motos, of course, which I think will be all over the road now, monitoring individual riders as they get dropped. Fred Wright was struggling to hold the wheel of Quinn Simmons last time we looked, but he is still just about in the wheel of the American national champion, who is not yet close to Bergadeau. And I think this says a lot about all of the riders in this breakaway. They are all fighting tooth and nail to try and just push as many watts as they possibly can. As they go up the Côte de Pêche David, one sign indicating it's named after David Gaudu. But right now, Wout Van Aert is the man dominating the climb, but Van Der Poel will attack from the third group on the road. It's an acceleration from the Dutchman, and who can follow at this point? Looking to bridge to Quinn Simmons and Fred Wright, and he flies past the Brit, and he may very shortly fly past the American national champion. His next wheel now is Mathieu Bergadeau. Van Der Poel catches, passes, and moves on. Dispatches of Mathieu Bergadeau, and now the two up front are being chased by the winner of Paris-Roubaix this year, Mathieu Van Der Poel, putting on an absolute clinic at the moment in pacing of a climb. But will it be enough? Van Der Poel goes over the Côte de Pêche David, or will do in a couple of meters' time, and he is distancing Van Aert. The gap goes out 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds as Van Der Poel approaches the line. Over goes Van Der Poel, but the gap is still rather large to a leading group which only have 8 kilometres remaining in the stage. This is the type of breakaway battle I enjoy the most on the road, and equally, the peloton now fighting for that 90-degree right-hander. It's so important to be in the leading wheels at the foot of the Côte de Pêche David. Jonas Vingegaard in the Danish helmet is doing just that at the moment. Ben Healy doing the same. Victor Campenaerts will lead the peloton in. And forward goes Campenaerts. Yells at the motorbike to get a move on. And that is Campenaerts done for the day. Immediately calls it quits there. But somebody who is not calling it quits is Kevin Vauquelin, who accelerates. Ben Healy chooses to follow himself in the yellow jersey. Cannot match the acceleration of the Frenchman. So is this a big recovery ride from Kevin Vauquelin after being the major loser of stage 10? This is Vauquelin stamping his authority back on the race and looking to gain some time in the general classification and the white jersey. He's being followed at the moment by Florian Lipovitz of Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe, but there is a distinctive gap between the Arkea B&B man and the German, and this is a counter acceleration, I believe, from Matteo Jorgensen Either that or he's pacing for Jonas Vingegaard over the top of this climb. Either way, Vingegaard positioned perfectly at the moment. It feels weird seeing Tadej Pogacar in the rainbow bands once more and not in a distinctive jersey. But the distinctive jersey at the front of the race at the moment is Mauro Schmid and his Swiss national champions jersey and bike combination, Van Der Poel. The more this goes on, the more I think that the Dutchman's in a chasse patate. And Abrahamsen and Schmid will continue to push on and will believe that that is the case. It's 23 seconds to Mathieu Van Der Poel, but Vauquelin has been reeled in by the peloton. Looking to see where Tadej Pogacar is, sat comfortably in second wheel, followed by Jonas Vingegaard. Pogacar sitting on Matteo Jorgensen, who is now caught up with Kevin Vauquelin, who is continuing to press on and try and put some of his rivals in the general classification in trouble. At the moment, Vauquelin is not able to do that, and we have an elite, very small peloton going over the final climb, and this is the acceleration from Vingegaard. Vingegaard makes his move over the top of the climb. Onto the wheel goes Remco Evenepoel, and Tadej Pogacar follows. Bora Hansgrohe continuing to pace over the top of the climb, and I think it will be all together over the Côte de Pêche David, a much more difficult climb than anticipated. I think both in the peloton and in the breakaway group, but now counter-offensive by Matteo Jorgensen. Pogacar has to follow and does so. Jonas Vingegaard does the same, latching onto the wheel of the world champion. Jorgensen lets go of the watts though, sees that Pogacar is latching onto the acceleration. Jonathan Narvaez is there too with Pogacar. So they're using different terrain now to put Pogacar under pressure. They've tried it before on the climbs, and they are now trying it on the valley roads and descents. Van Der Poel, though, continuing to try to catch the leading duo who are still working well together. It's 2 against 1, but the one is incredibly talented. Mathieu Van Der Poel takes the right turn, gets the line correct, and has 20 seconds advantage on the group of Axel Laurence behind, who has now dropped a couple of riders. It's Laurence, Bergerdo and Van Aert involved in the chase. So Van Der Poel against 2 riders who have been out front all day. Van Der Poel has had a tough day in the saddle as well as Remco makes a move on the flat. Nobody responds. Both Pogacar and Vingegaard look at each other and say, I'm not chasing that. In fact, it's Jonathan Narvaez who's gone for it. So has isolated Tadej Pogacar. Jorgensen, for some reason, chasing this one for Visma. I think actually it was Vingegaard and Pogacar looking at each other going, what are you doing, Jonathan? Why are you going up front? But up front at the moment are 2 riders. Jonas Abrahamsen is one of them. As more attacks shoot off the front as we've got a crash. And I think that's Pogacar down. Pogacar down with 4 kilometres to go. Got to get the chain back onto his bike. What has caused this incident? This is the first time I have seen Pogacar caught in a crash. Pogacar on the deck. No team car means that he'll have to take the bike that he's on at the moment, which is bashed and bruised, give the handlebars a whack to try and get it back straight again. But this is advantage Jonas Vingegaard now. Replay of what is going to happen. It was all kicking off and just overlaps the wheel of what looks like Tobias Harlan Johannesson. The hand goes up from the Norwegian. And I think it was both a lapse in concentration from both Johannesson and Pogacar. But Pogacar down and now in a chasing group. And this is advantage Soudal Quickstep and Visma Lease-A-Bike, who have sent riders to the front of this group to continue pressing on. Pogacar in trouble for the first time at this Tour de France, and it's come on a stage that nobody, I think, expected. Going into Toulouse, and suddenly Schmid and Abrahamsen at the front of the race is a secondary narrative. Mathieu Van Der Poel at 12 seconds, but Pogacar is the man that everybody's eyes are on at the moment. Through pulls Jonas Abrahamsen, and I think everybody in the yellow jersey group has realised what's happened to Pogacar and are slowing up. So Pogacar is going to be able to get back. But that is the first I've seen Tadej Pogacar involved in a crash. Lapse in concentration from the Slovenian, and the first I think I've ever seen from him at the Tour de France. He's being paced back by Jonathan Narvaez and Yates. And Pogacar shuts it down with the help of no pace being injected. But pace is really being injected by Mathieu Van Der Poel at the moment. Sat third in the race at the moment for the stage win, but has only 10 seconds to close. He's going to end up running out of road, I think, I'm afraid, and it's going to be a battle between two riders who have not won a stage at the Tour de France before. Van Der Poel, of course, prolific winner at this race, has done it multiple years now, and has already got a stage win at the Tour this year. Abrahamsen and Schmid, neither of them have won at the Tour de France at all, let alone at this year's race. But Van Der Poel is closing the gap, and Abrahamsen cannot afford to mess around. Everybody in the yellow jersey group is looking round at each other, so once again we can get back to the head of the race. Abrahamsen comes back to the front. Schmid sat second wheel, but these two cannot look at each other because Van Der Poel is coming up behind and will be the best sprinter of the three of them, and should, in essence, be the freshest of the three of them. But both Abrahamsen and Schmid have worked together. Van Der Poel's had to chase across on his own. He has completely gapped Van Aert and Laurens, who are in the third group on the road, so it's going to be between these three for the stage win. Schmid and Abrahamsen have 8 seconds on Mathieu Van Der Poel and are not looking at conceding that at all. Under the Flamme Rouge they go. Schmid leads the duo. Abrahamsen sat second wheel. Van Der Poel starting to look behind. Is that a bit of resignation from the Dutchman? He's got to keep his eyes forward. Laurens and Van Aert are far down the road now. He's got to focus on potentially getting the stage win. But we get to the stationary cameras now. No more motorbikes will be the case soon. And Van Der Poel is looking to close. Shades of that famous Amstel Gold Race win. Of course, he's not in the Dutch national champions jersey, but the front duo are starting to play around. Round the final corner they go, and I think it's just too far for Mathieu Van Der Poel. Round looks Mauro Schmid, and the Alpecin Deceuninck rider is getting very close. I think it will be close, but no cigar. Abrahamsen sits second wheel and has done so since the kilometre to go banner. Off go the duo. Mathieu Van Der Poel is resigned to defeat, but who will take it from the front? It looks like Abrahamsen right hand side, Mauro Schmid left hand side, 2 spectators in the road. I don't really know why they're there, but Abrahamsen wins the stage. And a chaotic finish in a chaotic stage. I don't even know what that spectator was doing in the middle of the road. Abrahamsen gets there, and I don't think any of them had realised what was going on. Either way, back to the third group we go. Neither of these guys are going to finish on the podium of the stage. It's Abrahamsen with the stage win. Van Aert looking over his right shoulder. Simmons sat second wheel. Laurens third wheel, and Bergerdo lights it up. Shoulder check from Arnaud Delis on Fred Wright. And Delis sprinting on the right-hand side is going to get around everybody, but has he gone a little bit too early? Van Aert sprints later on. Laurens gets into the wheel of Delis, and Delis finishes 4th. Van Aert and Laurens battled for 5th. We will await to see the results on that. And he was in the winning breakaway, but not the winner on the stage. A battling ride from the Italian on Astana, who will cross the line in 10th position. Abrahamsen finally knows that he's won it. Getting a microphone shoved in his face, but I don't think he's down for an interview right now because he looks completely battered and bruised. But Abrahamsen takes it. Both of them with a pretty weak and feeble bike throw, but it would be after being out front all stage. And I think there is no more deserving of a stage winner than Jonas Abrahamsen based on the last few years of racing from him at the Tour. 29 years of age and takes his first victory in a Grand Tour. And he does it by about a wheel. Jonas Abrahamsen, your stage winner. And we will now see the GC group, which, I mean, the GC battle today has been electric. We've seen Pogacar on the ground. We've seen Vingegaard attacking for the first time properly at this race. We've seen Visma try once more to put Pogacar in trouble, and they did it, perhaps not in the way they expected to, but Groupama FDJ are riding this one in at the yellow jersey group. Riders are going to sprint for the line, and other GC guys are going to have to make sure that they don't get caught up in any more crashes. Tudor Pro Cycling on the front, looking to set this one up. They missed out on the breakaway today, and will be disappointed with that. But at the moment, Alaphilippe sat second wheel, and they're leading out Marius Meyerhofer. Off goes Meyerhofer. But on the left-hand side, it's Caden Groves who gets to the line first of the GC group, who all finished together. But that wasn't going to be the case in the late part of the stage. 4 kilometres to go. Pogacar hits the deck. The first time I think I've ever seen Pogacar crash. But Abrahamsen wins the stage for Uno X and looks absolutely beaten despite being the winner. Pat on the back from Thor Hushovd, who's getting interviewed by Norwegian television. I still don't think Abrahamsen is in the mood to speak, as Pogacar does a couple of high fives with Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe members and his teammate Adam Yates. Nils Pollitt turns up, look of concern on his face. And what is the damage to Pogacar other than slight mental damage? I think that's more on Johannesson. Pogacar, perhaps if he was a little more alert, would have reacted to that. It was Johannesson trying to get across to the Vortelan acceleration and ends up chopping Pogacar. But a small bit of damage, a small bit of road rash on the left hamstring area of Tadej Pogacar, as we've got some radio from UAE Team Emirates XRG. Couple of holes in the shorts. UAE Team Emirates say, "All good, Tadej?" ? Tadej responds, all good, respect to the bunch, respect to everybody, thank you. And there was a brief time where Soudal Quickstep tried it, but they got the perhaps got the call through that it would have been a little bit too cheeky. In the end, I think if you crash, then that's on you, but there we are. And Uno X take their first ever victory at a Grand Tour. And the rider to provide it is the rider I think many people will have expected. Not necessarily Alexander Kristoff. He missed out on the couple of occasions he did go to Grand Tours, but Jonas Abrahamsen is the winner for Uno X Mobility. A big, big victory for the Norwegian team. Let's get up the results page to summarise what's happened on the day's stage. Jonas Abrahamsen wins in a 2-up sprint from Mauro Schmid in second. Van Der Poel tried his best to get across, but in the end will have to settle for third position, with Arnaud Delis in fourth and Wout Van Aert in fifth from the third group on the road. Axel Laurence, Fred Wright and Mathieu Van Der Poel, as well as Quinn Simmons, with the other riders in that third group, and Ballerini, the last of the breakaway riders, in 10th at 1 minute 11. Caden Groves and Alberto Dainese were the leaders in the sprint from the GC group, but everybody in the general classification remains on the same time. Ben Healy crosses the line 24th in the yellow jersey and best of the GC riders, with Evenepoel 28th on the same time. Gal on 3 minutes 28 as well. Jorgensen, Pogacar and Vingegaard. Pogacar and Vingegaard again crossing the line unseparated and together. So that is everything. Have any GC guys lost time? I shouldn't think so on a day like this. Aurélien Paripantra loses a brief bit of time. But other than that, the likes of Roglic, the likes of Onley, Ben O'Connor as well, Carlos Rodriguez, Lipovitz too, on the same time. So I've got a podcast to record now after this, but I have thoroughly enjoyed my just under 2 hours on this stream, watching the stage, and plenty to talk about, despite it being a hill stage on paper. So that is me. I will be back tomorrow with a reaction from the day's stage and another watch along. And then we go into the mountains, because this is what tomorrow looks like. Not this, because this is today. We go to Otakam. Or category effort, 13.5 kilometres, 7.8%. The first mountain summit finish, the first proper mountain stage of this Tour de France, is tomorrow. And it's 180 grueling kilometres in the saddle, up soon. But that will be tomorrow. And today, the day belongs to Jonas Abrahamsen. So, I will get all the reaction from this stage and pile it into the stream for tomorrow. I will be there. Hopefully you will be there too. Have a very good rest of your day, everyone. Enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.